Hello and welcome. In this video, we'll explore minimalism, not as a trend or aesthetic, but as a way of creating more space for what truly matters. Minimalism is often misunderstood as owning less or living with strict rules, but at its core, it's about reducing mental clutter, stress, and unnecessary pressure. In this series, we'll look at what minimalism really is, how it affects the mind and nervous system, and how it can support a calmer, more intentional way of living without turning into another form of control or self-optimization. This is a slow, reflective exploration of minimalism, psychology, and everyday life. There's no rush here. Thank you for being here. Part 1 on what minimalism really is when less stops being a number. Minimalism is often misunderstood as a number of objects, a number of clothes, a number of rules. But minimalism does not begin with counting. It begins with noticing. Noticing how much of our attention is constantly pulled outward. Noticing how many decisions we make before noon. Noticing how little space is left to simply be present with our own lives. This first part is not about how to own less. It is about understanding why less can sometimes feel like relief. 1. Minimalism is not an aesthetic. In popular culture, minimalism often appears as a style. White rooms, clean lines, carefully curated shelves. While this aesthetic can be calming, it is not the essence of minimalism. Minimalism is not about how things look. It is about how they relate to you. A room can look minimal and still feel tense. Another can be full and still feel grounded. What matters is not visual emptiness, but mental and emotional load. True minimalism is invisible at first glance. It shows itself in how lightly you move through your day. 2. Minimalism is not deprivation. Another common misunderstanding is that minimalism is about giving things up, about restriction, about discipline, about denying desire. But minimalism does not begin with saying no. It begins with asking why. Why do I own this? Why do I keep this? Why does letting go feel uncomfortable? Minimalism is not about less pleasure. It is about less noise between you and what actually matters. When something adds genuine value, minimalism has no reason to remove it. 3. Historical roots. When less was about freedom, minimalism did not originate as a lifestyle trend. Its roots lie in philosophical traditions that were deeply concerned with freedom. Stoicism, the Stoics understood that dependence creates vulnerability. When your sense of stability depends on external things, you are at their mercy. They practiced voluntary simplicity not as punishment, but as training the mind to remain steady even when circumstances change. In Buddhism, suffering is closely linked to attachment. Not attachment in the sense of caring, but attachment as clinging. The more tightly we grip, the more fragile we become. Minimalism, from this perspective, is not about emptiness. It is about non-attachment, owning without being owned. Taoism adds another layer. The idea that excess effort creates imbalance. More control does not always lead to more peace. Often, it creates tension. Minimalism here is not effortful reduction, but allowing unnecessary weight to fall away. 4. The psychological weight of more. Modern psychology offers a clear explanation for why excess can feel exhausting. Every object demands attention maintenance decision-making. Even when we are not consciously thinking about our belongings, they remain present in the background of the mind. This creates what psychologists call cognitive load, a subtle but constant drain on mental resources. Minimalism reduces this load not by force, but by removing what no longer earns its place. 5. Decision fatigue and the quiet relief of fewer choices. The human brain is not designed for endless choice. Every decision, no matter how small, costs energy. What to wear, what to use, what to keep. Minimalism simplifies the environment so the mind does not have to constantly negotiate with it. This is not laziness, it is conservation. Energy saved on trivial decisions becomes available for Relationships, creativity, reflection, rest. Minimalism creates fewer doors to open, not to limit life, but to move through it with less friction. 6. Objects and identity. One of the deepest reasons letting go can feel difficult is that objects often carry identity. They represent past versions of ourselves, imagined futures, unfulfilled potential. Letting go can feel like erasing a possibility. Minimalism asks a gentle but uncomfortable question. Who am I without this? This is not about losing identity. It is about loosening the belief that identity must be stored in objects. 7. Minimalism is not control. Ironically, minimalism can turn into another form of control. Rules about owning exactly the right amount. Pressure to be perfectly minimal. Comparison with others. At that point, minimalism stops being freeing. True minimalism is flexible. It adapts to life instead of trying to dominate it. When minimalism becomes rigid, it recreates the very tension it was meant to reduce. 8. Minimalism as relationship, not rule. A more sustainable understanding of minimalism is to see it as a relationship. A relationship with things, time, attention, desire. Relationships evolve. What feels essential in one phase of life may feel heavy in another. Minimalism allows for this movement. It does not demand purity, it invites awareness. 9. The quiet shift minimalism creates. When excess recedes, something subtle happens. Silence appears. Not empty silence, but usable silence. Space to notice thoughts. Space to feel emotions without distraction. Space to respond instead of react. Minimalism does not promise happiness. It creates conditions. What grows in that space depends on the person. Conclusion of Part 1. Clearing the ground. Minimalism is not about having nothing. It is about having room. Room to breathe. Room to think. Room to choose intentionally. In this first part, we have not talked about methods. We have talked about meaning. Because minimalism that begins with technique often collapses. Minimalism that begins with understanding tends to last. Part 2. Minimalism and the mind. Stress, identity, and the nervous system. When external order reveals internal noise, many people approach minimalism with a practical intention. They want less clutter, less distraction, less chaos. What they often don't expect is that reducing the external world can make the internal world louder at first. Minimalism does not only change rooms, it changes conditions. And under new conditions, the mind behaves differently. 1. The nervous system and the cost of constant stimulation. The human nervous system evolved in environments with limited stimuli. Sound, movement, novelty, all carried meaning. In modern life, stimulation is constant. Notifications, visual clutter, background noise, unfinished tasks quietly waiting for attention. Even when we are resting, our nervous system often isn't. Minimalism reduces stimulation not by avoidance, but by intentional subtraction. When fewer signals compete for attention, the nervous system has a chance to downshift. Not into numbness, but into regulation. 2. Why clutter creates stress. Clutter is rarely neutral. Each object is a reminder of something unfinished, of a decision postponed, of a version of life not fully lived. Even when we stop consciously noticing clutter, the brain continues to register it. This creates low-grade stress. Not dramatic, not acute, but persistent. Minimalism reduces this background tension by removing unresolved signals. It is not the absence of objects that calms the system. It is the absence of unanswered demands. 3. Decision fatigue and the quiet exhaustion of choice. Modern life offers extraordinary freedom, and with it, extraordinary choice. Choice is often celebrated as empowerment, but psychologically, it carries a cost. Every decision consumes mental energy. When the environment demands constant micro-decisions, the mind becomes fatigued long before the day feels full. Minimalism reduces the number of negotiations between you and your surroundings, not to limit life, but to preserve attention for what truly needs it. 4. Minimalism and anxiety. Space without distraction. Anxiety often thrives in noise, not only external noise, but mental noise. When distractions disappear, anxious thoughts may surface more clearly. This is sometimes mistaken as minimalism causing anxiety. In reality, minimalism removes buffers. It reveals what was already present. This is not a failure of minimalism. It is an invitation to meet the mind without constant escape. 5. The temptation to replace clutter with control. For some, minimalism becomes another strategy to manage anxiety. Perfect order, strict rules, rigid systems. At first, this can feel stabilizing, but control is fragile. When minimalism turns into obsession, it mirrors the very patterns it was meant to soften. True minimalism supports flexibility. It allows disorder when life requires it. It adapts rather than insists. 6. Identity without excess. Who are you when nothing proves it? Possessions often act as external confirmation. They signal success, taste, belonging, progress. When these signals are reduced, a quiet question can emerge. Who am I without visible evidence? This question can feel unsettling, but it also carries potential. Minimalism invites identity to move inward, from display to experience, from possession to presence. 7. Emotional space. What appears when things leave? As physical space opens, emotional space often follows. Grief, restlessness, longing, relief. Minimalism does not create these emotions. It removes what kept them at a distance. This is why minimalism is not inherently calming. It is clarifying. And clarity is not always comfortable. 8. Minimalism and overthinking. When external stimuli decrease, the mind often fills the gap. Thought loops, reflection, replaying conversations. This is not a problem to solve. It is a phase. Over time, the mind learns that it does not need to perform constantly. Minimalism does not stop overthinking. It changes your relationship with it. Thoughts become visible and therefore less absolute. 9. Rest as a skill, not a collapse. Many people discover something unexpected through minimalism. They don't know how to rest. Without distraction, rest feels unfamiliar, even threatening. Minimalism exposes how deeply productivity is wired into identity. Learning to rest without guilt is one of minimalism's most subtle challenges and one of its greatest gifts. 10. Minimalism does not heal. It makes healing possible. Minimalism is often mistaken for a solution. It is not. It does not resolve trauma. It does not eliminate anxiety. It does not create meaning on its own. What it does is remove interference. It creates conditions where nervous system regulation becomes easier, awareness deepens, values become clearer. Minimalism is not the work itself. It is the space in which the work can happen. Conclusion of Part 2. Space is not the end point. Reducing the external world changes the internal one. Sometimes gently, sometimes unexpectedly. Minimalism does not promise peace. It offers honesty. Honesty about what remains when distraction is no longer available. Part 3. Living minimalism without turning it into a new pressure. When simplicity becomes another standard, minimalism often begins as relief. Relief from excess, relief from noise, relief from constant wanting, but over time, a subtle shift can occur. Minimalism can quietly turn into another standard to live up to, another identity, another way of measuring oneself. This final part explores how minimalism can remain what it was meant to be, a support for life, not a demand placed upon it. 1. When minimalism becomes an identity. At a certain point, minimalism can stop being a practice and start becoming a label, a way to signal discipline, taste, Moral clarity. When this happens, minimalism begins to harden. Objects are no longer just objects. They become symbols of correctness. This is often where tension enters. Minimalism was meant to reduce pressure, not relocate it. 2. The subtle comparison. Trap minimalism can create a quiet hierarchy. Who owns less? Who is more intentional? Who is doing it right? Even when unspoken, comparison creeps in. But comparison reintroduces the very noise minimalism tries to soften. A life does not become lighter by being measured against others. Minimalism loses its grounding when it stops being personal. 3. Minimalism and different seasons of life. Minimalism looks different at different times. A life with children does not resemble a solitary life. A life in transition does not resemble stability. A life under stress requires different supports than a calm one. Rigid minimalism ignores this reality. A flexible minimalism adapts. What matters is not consistency of appearance, but consistency of intention. 4. Letting go without forcing it. There is a difference between letting go and pushing away. Minimalism does not require urgency. Some things leave easily, others need time. Forcing detachment often creates resistance. Allowing detachment creates trust. Minimalism respects timing, both external and internal. 5. Minimalism and relationships. Minimalism is not only about things, it also affects how we relate to time, conversations, expectations, obligations. Living minimally can mean fewer commitments, but deeper presence. Not fewer people, but clearer boundaries. Minimalism does not isolate, it clarifies. 6. Digital minimalism and mental space. The most intense clutter today is often invisible. Tabs open, notifications waiting, content constantly refreshing. Digital minimalism is less about restriction and more about intention. What enters your attention shapes how you experience your life. Minimalism asks, what deserves access to my awareness? 7. When minimalism feels uncomfortable. Minimalism is not always soothing. Sometimes it reveals restlessness, loneliness, uncertainty. This discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that distraction is no longer doing the work. Minimalism does not remove discomfort. It removes avoidance. What follows depends on how gently you respond. 8. Minimalism and meaning. Eventually, minimalism raises a deeper question. If I don't fill my life with things, what do I fill it with? This question cannot be answered by minimalism itself. Minimalism clears space. Meaning must enter it. Through relationships, through values, through engagement with life as it is, minimalism prepares the ground. It does not dictate what grows there. 9. A quiet, sustainable minimalism. A sustainable minimalism is almost unremarkable. It does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition. It feels light because it is not trying to prove anything. This kind of minimalism allows exceptions, welcomes imperfection, changes over time. It supports life rather than shaping it. 10. Minimalism as an ongoing conversation. Minimalism is not a destination. It is a conversation you continue to have with your environment and yourself. Sometimes you add, sometimes you remove. What matters is not purity, but awareness. Minimalism stays alive when it remains responsive. Final conclusion, space is a beginning, not an end. Minimalism does not promise a perfect life. It offers space. Space to notice what matters. Space to feel what was muted. Space to choose more deliberately. What you do with that space is deeply personal. Minimalism does not ask for loyalty. It asks for honesty. And when it remains honest, it can quietly support a life that feels less crowded, both outside and within. As we come to the end of this video, one thing becomes clear. Minimalism is not about having as little as possible. It's about creating space for clarity, for presence, and for a life that feels less crowded. both externally and internally. Minimalism doesn't solve every problem, and it's not meant to, but it can reduce noise, lower stress, and make room for more conscious choices when it's practiced gently and without pressure. If this video resonated with you, feel free to reflect on what enough means in your own life. Minimalism looks different for everyone. Are there specific topics you're interested in or a particular question you'd like answered in your life? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe now and join me on your journey toward more clarity and inner strength. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and take care.